All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. It looks like we're just at the hour right now, and we will get started. Just some kind of quick housekeeping stuff before we jump in. Q&A is live, so if you do have a question, go ahead and write it in Q&A, and we'll get to those questions at the end. If you did register before the 8th for the webinar, you're entitled for a little goodie package coming from us. So you'll be in touch soon with somebody from the company to get some shipping information, and be sure to follow up and provide that shipping information if you want to get that swag pack. One more thing with current stuff going on, just be sure that we do not actually send any Zoom links out. So if you receive a Zoom link that did not come from us, and we would advise you not to open that. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and hop right in. So today we're going to be talking about the SGIP program specifically. It's going to be a great presentation we got. Let me jump in here, see if I can control my screen. We have myself, Troy Daniels, Technical Service Manager here at Simplify. We have Dan Sauer, also here at Simplify, Global Business Development Manager. And we'll also have Brian Bishop on a little bit later with the actual SGIP program, PG&E. So that'll be a great time, and Brian will be able to answer some pretty in-depth questions. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the company, I think, to get started. I want to kind of just go over some overview of the company, and then we'll jump into some SGIP stuff. Okay, so this is kind of the nitty-gritty timeline of where Simplify is. Founded in 2010, actually was named OES Energy at the time. From there, we moved on to some military and emergency response projects that really started to advance our product lines. From there, we added some more plug-and-play stuff, and actually relaunched Simplify Power in 2015 to 2016. From there, we've been ramping up manufacturing and continue to grow the company. Kind of what we stand behind is safe, proven, and simple technology. Non-toxic, non-hazardous, cobalt-free chemistry. Mitigating the risk for thermal runaway. We are UL certified. We've been proven, deployed in over 40 countries, and that number is, I believe, pretty low. I think that's changed now to even higher. Over 100 megawatt hours installed worldwide, and even validated by the U.S. Army and Marine Corps. And simple, meaning no cooling, no thermal monitoring, no fire suppression, and no maintenance in all of our products. And we'll get into the chemistry here coming up. Okay, so here we go, 43 countries, 100 plus megawatt hours since 2010, and this number continues to grow, sometimes even exponentially. Just some of the kind of fields we cover, everything from commercial, industrial, residential, a lot of emergency preparedness and response, which is definitely pretty relevant in these times, off-grid and microgrid power security as well. So we definitely kind of cover the gamut here, and really can cater to most projects with various products. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about battery chemistry and what makes Simplify different. While you might see, a lot of different lithium chemistries, being sold out there, you really need to look at what kind of lithium chemistry is being put into a battery. So if you're looking at this chart, if you've taken any training with me, you've probably seen this chart already, but a lot of these cobalt-based batteries, you can see the lithium iron phosphate is the only one out of these that does not have a danger of thermal runaway, does not require cooling systems, safety monitoring, and can withstand some pretty high temperatures. So we try to stick with this chemistry. It's safer, it's cleaner, and we see better performance out of it overall. After we picked our chemistry, as far as manufacturing goes, we still need to pick a form factor that it's held in. These are some of the main three ones that you see around a lot: cylindrical, pouch, prismatic. Pouch cells, things like laptops, cell phones. Oftentimes you'll see pouch cells there. Prismatic, I don't see as much anymore. They definitely were in use and still are, but they tend to be kind of big and blocky and hard to use, as well as a little bit higher in cost. Cylindrical, probably the most common, idea of a battery is a cylindrical form factor. I mean, think AA batteries, that is a cylindrical form factor. So we actually use a cylindrical form factor with a lithium iron phosphate chemistry. So that's kind of just a brief overview of where we're at as a company. And I'll be jumping back on here in a little bit to go through specific product stuff, but I'm actually going to go ahead and hand over the controls to Dan Sauer, and he's going to go through the SGIP overview.
All right, thank you, Troy. Can everyone, or Troy, you have my audio on? Awesome. All right, well, we do have a wide variety of attendees today, so we're going to cover, as Troy did, a bit of our history, and then certainly an overview of SGIP once Brian joins. And then I'll go into some of the details in terms of the application process, because with the variety of audience members we have today and attendees, ranging from homeowners to distributor partners, installers and developers, there's a little bit of information in here for everyone. And then of course, during our Q&A, we can really dive into some details that are applicable to you and your situations or your customers. So that said, I'd like to start here. There we go. All right, so a brief overview here. SGIP has been around for a few years now, and it's run by the California Public Utility Commission, the CPUC. Bear with me as my screen jumps around. Sorry. Okay. So with that, SGIP is offering rebates for installing energy storage technology, both at the residential level as well as non-residential facilities. So currently the qualifiers are within all the utility districts from PG&E, SoCal Gas, SCE, Edison, or SDG down in Southern California. With that, the 2020 SGIP has made some significant changes in light of the changing landscape, the issues facing both customers, since it is a ratepayer funded program, to everyone in between here in the state of California. And most of the changes involve, or are due to rather, the increased fire safety and resiliency that we're building here in the state. So the CPUC has approved additional funding this year for SGIP by injecting an additional $675 million over the next 5 years. And that major focus again will be on resiliency. So we'll get into some of those details and how that may impact both some of your business decisions as well as some of your customer types. So just again, a little quick overview. The equity of resiliency has grown to $1 per watt hour, which is fantastic, really focusing on low income, vulnerable customers, of course, critical care facilities, and those really high risk fire threat districts. And those maps are available, and I'll show you some links as well to where we can identify those to see if they're either in your current map of customers or if you're looking to possibly expand and help out those types of customers. Additionally, there's the equity budget line. That's again, still for the low income customer types and disadvantaged communities, any institutions, agencies, small businesses, especially in these areas. And as you can see, about 85 cents a watt hour there. Now, getting into larger scale storage, something we'll touch on in terms of our products and how that relates to some of the options you can offer in terms of Simplify and their safety. But the large scale storage, that's running at 35 cents per watt hour. And that's really anything, as SGIP identifies it, over 10 kilowatt system in terms of the storage. And then of course there's small residential. That's the bread and butter over the years across all utility districts and will continue to be the same moving forward over the next 5 years. And that is anything, again, under 10 kilowatts in size. All right. All right, as promised, let's take a look at a couple maps here. What we're looking at here in the first on the left-hand side is some of the census tracts available, or rather eligible for the equity budget. Now, that can cover approximately up to 85% of the cost in certain situations. And as you can tell on this map, again, these are available online, and you can kind of cross-reference between the census tracts and the fire zones. And that's where, again, there's major opportunity to help with these resiliency and, of course, disadvantaged communities or low-income communities that really will benefit from this program, of course, helping your customers. So the disadvantaged communities, of course, tribal lands, and then other low-income areas on the left-hand side of the map. You can see a large focus out in the east, southeast counties, and of course, up in the PG&E territory, which Brian can also dive a bit deeper into, as those maps tend to overlap quite a bit. Also on the right-hand side, we're seeing $1,000 per kilowatt hour, potentially covering up to 100% of the cost of a system in some of these tier 2 and tier 3 high threat fire areas. So it'll be important as you evaluate your customers, your opportunities, and how best to utilize the ratepayer funded dollars in SGIP by taking a look at these maps and really getting to know where the opportunities lie. All right, so I want to take a bit of time, as these next two slides will be really important, to understand the two major buckets that we're looking at, and the first being residential projects and their eligibility. So standard projects, these systems must be installed on a residential property. The general market rebate of approximately $250 per kilowatt hour. And this means the rebate may cover about 25% of the cost of an average energy storage system. And would love to hear some opinions and during the Q&A on what you've seen in your experiences, whether you're a homeowner or installer or developer on the residential side. And with the equity projects, again, to be eligible, you must meet at least one of these criteria. And these are some of the changing landscapes of the policy that I think are important for businesses certainly to understand. So whether a customer may live in a single family home and your home is subject to some resales restrictions in that instance. And of course, we have links and some details around what those resale restrictions are. Additionally, we have you living in a single family home or apartment and have already participated in or reserved incentives in the California Solar Initiative's single family affordable solar homes or disadvantaged communities. Or you live in an apartment that is considered low income housing. That will change across the state. And then anywhere in California in Indian country. Additionally, we have the equity resiliency projects. So this is in addition to the equity project lines, whether you've experienced more than 2 of the utility public safety power shutoffs, the PSPS. And you may remember from last year's fire season, Simplify doing a California program where during the PSPS, we offered deep discounts and a lot of additional assistance to help bring energy storage to these areas. So what you'll find in a lot of CPUC documents, or at least web pages, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge currently, to be quite honest, in how to find and cross-reference between the fire zones and low-income areas, as well as who has actually experienced those public safety power shutoffs. And we can get into those details and those resources a little bit later in the presentation. Because it does take a little extra legwork to really figure that out, aside from, of course, speaking with homeowners. But again, they must have experienced at least 2 of the PSPS shutoffs or live in a tier 2 or tier 3 fire threat district. And of course, one of the following criteria here, living in a multifamily deed restricted housing or single family home subject to some of the resale restrictions. Additionally, you are currently enrolled in a utility medical baseline program. That's another big area. Typically, if you have a hooked up to a respirator or a motorized wheelchair, things like that typically are indicative of being in a medical baseline program. Or you've received or reserved other solar-related incentives, or your home relies on electric pump for wells for water. Again, getting into some of the Eastern County areas, that is a bit more prevalent. Now let's focus a bit on some of the non-residential project eligibilities. This is another rather large bucket of eligibility, focusing again on larger scale projects. And of course, with the PSPS shops, there is a huge amount of opportunity with businesses that are going to be needing and requiring energy storage as a part of their solution for resiliency this year and for the years of the future, moving forward. So any non-residential customers, the rebates kicked up to about $350 per kilowatt hour. And this means it can cover about, again, 35% of average energy storage system costs that we're seeing today in the state. The equity projects to be eligible meet one of the following criteria: be a government educational institution, nonprofit organization, or just a small business. Typically, I believe that's about under 500 employees or so. And be located in a disadvantaged community. Again, these links will be available. Or be located in a census tract that the median household income below 80% of the statewide median income average, right? And then from there, the equity resiliency projects eligibility must meet the following criteria. And that's experience, as similarly to the last slide, 2 public safety power shutoffs, or again, be tier 2 or tier 3 high fire threat district, and of course, serve customers that are in those DACs, right? The disadvantaged communities. So businesses can still reside outside of those areas, but so long as they're serving customers within those disadvantaged communities, that will still qualify for these eligibility requirements. Additional criteria here, one of the following. Here's some great examples of some of those opportunities. I won't read through all of them, but from call centers for 911, medical facilities, cooling centers, even the homeless shelters, again, as we're seeing some of the COVID-19 solutions, or rather, social distancing. We're seeing more homeless shelters increase around the state, and that's going to be one area where potentially we can see some equity resiliency funds being directed to. Also, grocery stores, smaller supermarkets, corner stores with less than $15 million in annual gross receipts. That's the key right there for some of those grocery stores. And we've seen quite a few. As a manufacturer, we always keep a close eye on who our customers are, of course. And we have seen an increase in quotes and projects going into some of those types of grocery stores around the state. And being an independent living center or a food bank also is part of that criteria. So just to have a brief review of some of the incentive levels, equity resiliency is $1 per watt hour. The resiliency adder is 15 cents per watt hour and available to those critical facilities that do not serve any low income or disadvantaged communities, and not available for any of the low income or non-vulnerable residential customers. And recapping again, the equity incentive is at 85 cents a watt hour, and kicking up to the large scale over 10 kilowatt systems, that's been unchanged at between 35 cents to 25 cents per watt hour. And of course, the small residential being the biggest bulk of projects over the years, range between 20 to 15 cents a watt hour. So there have been some updates, help streamline the process. It has been aggravating over the years in certain regards to the application process. So this has been some of the CPUC and SGIP's attempts to help streamline the process, make it a bit easier for everyone, less costly overall, so we can start seeing a wider variety of participants, ranging from smaller installers in the state to developers. And so the entry of technical specs will be more automated moving forward in the application process for the products that you're choosing. Of course, Simplify, our products, not all of them, but most are approved on the SGIP equipment list. And I'll take a quick second to explain a bit deeper that if for any reason you see a product, whether Simplify or others, that's not on that SGIP equipment list, I know they are currently working on a pending review list, rather, for products that will eventually make that SGIP equipment list. And for instance, Simplify, we have a high voltage product that's currently pending review and will be available to put in for projects that are making reservations right now. But obviously it won't be official until it's gone through the full review process. So in the event that you see a product that your customer is using or you want to use and it's not available or automated in the specs, you can still put that product information in and perhaps maybe just contact one of the utility district application reviewers. And again, we'll have some of that contact information at the end of the presentation here. Also, virtual inspection options for certain projects will be available. And a really nice feature, the application fee will be waived for all residential projects, which again will make the barriers a lot less moving forward for folks. So a copy of energy efficiency audit no longer required. Applicants allowed to attest on the RRF that an audit was performed, which is nice. Other form consolidation and step modifications will continue to happen, and we'll keep information updated as available. So with that, just had one more thing I wanted to touch base on, and that is with the new equity and equity resiliency incentives. Last week, we got word that this is delayed until May 1st. Initially, about 10 to 14 days, somewhere around there, they're going to be doing a soft launch. That means developers can begin assembling applications, but you won't be able to submit those applications just yet during that soft launch. Also, lastly, the resiliency adder and new small residential steps will likely be available in June of this year. Again, we're pending and waiting on those official guidelines to come out, but that's what we've been told so far. So I'll leave it at that. Make sure you keep your notes available for the Q&A coming up, and I'll turn this back over to Troy to dive into our battery specs and how that'll apply to your projects.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. So yeah, Dan kind of mentioned it a little bit, regarding there is some products that are pending. We'll just talk a little bit about, what we have to offer as far as what's currently listed on the SGIP and really what it is. So I already talked a lot about this at the beginning. So again, this battery that we are using for this program that is eligible is our lithium iron phosphate. And this is the actual battery right here, our 3.8 model. And again, using cylindrical form factors. So this battery is actually warranted for 10 years. And actually this warranty is just being updated now, but it is 10 years at any depth of discharge. So this is a little older on the slides. EOL is something you might hear as well. If you look around our warranty, that's end of life capacity. Basically saying, at say 10-year mark, we expect to see a minimum of 80% of the original battery's capacity. So I would encourage you to look around at some other battery manufacturers. You'll definitely find that there is some pretty low EOLs out there, and ours is actually pretty high. As far as temperature range goes of these batteries, -4 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, that's operating. So we're talking discharge or standby. The more important number, I would say, charging temperature, which is actually 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Definitely as far as the high end goes, no need for coolant, HVAC, ventilation, anything like that. Each of our batteries actually comes with a battery management system. Pretty straightforward. Ours is actually internal currently, so it does not communicate with any other devices. It simply just does its own single battery. Basically, what we're looking for in the BMS is overcurrent protection, short circuit protection, and charge and discharge protection. Now, these are kind of last-ditch effort protections. It is important that you still always program your system, and don't rely too much on the BMS to actually handle those various stopping points and allowable parameters. Also, the battery management system handles cell balancing, which is really important when it comes to lithium batteries, especially with a smaller, I should say, form factor. Like we use, a pretty small battery where we're actually paralleling a bunch of batteries to build up larger systems. I'm going to briefly talk here. Typically in one of my trainings, I might get a little bit more in depth on the C rating, what our batteries are actually rated at, which is C/2, and what they can handle as far as maximum discharge, which is C/2. So, why is it important in this sense? If we're looking at a lot of residential systems that maybe have some larger loads, or even some commercial stuff that Dan was talking about, that do apply for the SGIP program, you can rely on our batteries to have a very high discharge rate. C/2, that's continuous discharge, and the battery that is actually eligible for SGIP can handle 60 amps DC at 10 minutes per battery, which is extremely high for the battery's capacity. So we can definitely cover some heavier loads with a relatively small battery bank. All of our batteries are scalable and expandable. So as far as scalability goes, here on the left, you can see 88 batteries put into parallel. We always parallel our batteries, but you can see here we built up a 300 kilowatt hour system with 48 volt batteries. So definitely we can scale up to fit most needs, even with our smaller 48 volt stuff. Expandability is really cool. We can actually go back to an older system and add new batteries. This system here, 20.8 kilowatt hours in the beginning, and I believe it was a couple of years later they came back and added another whole bank to this, getting up to 41.6. Definitely helpful when you're designing, if you're an installer, you're designing systems for people, maybe their energy needs grow, their power demands grow, whatever it may be, you can always have that assurance that you'll be able to add some batteries in that initial phase. And it's true with all lithium batteries. Self-contained and stable, does not need specific gravity checks, no maintenance basically, no vent off-gassing, no need for venting, and a very low self-discharge rate, actually less than 1% per month. Meaning the batteries really get a holding a charge, which, if we're looking at a backup system on a residential home, you're really going to want to have that battery hold a good charge, make sure that when that power goes out, you have a full battery. And this low self-discharge rate really does help with that. Okay, so I mentioned what's currently eligible, and just to mention again, Dan, as he mentioned, we will be, we do have stuff pending currently, but the 3.8 48 volt is what's eligible, widely our most popular product, so it's kind of the one we went after first. These are simple parallel connections only. They could replace lead acid batteries. They could be on a backup system, residential. These are integrated with the battery management system as well as a circuit breaker for protection. And these are scalable, and we can really fit any energy or power demands that might come up. Some kind of key values I wanted to just go over. Peeking through the application process of the SGIP, really the big thing with the battery is going to be your kilowatt rating. So your total rated capacity as far as power goes, that's 1.9 kilowatts per battery. So if you have 4 batteries, you would multiply 1.9 times 4. When we're going for the kilowatt hour, total rated energy storage, 3.8 per battery. And again, if you have 4 batteries, 3.8 times 4. those are kind of the big values I'm seeing. The other things I see in the SGIP application is company, simplify power, and product, which is the 3.8 48 volt. So if you ever have questions on the application, you can always call us and we'll jump here into resources in hopes that we can help you just move the process along. Real quick, kind of just talking about, what's your role in the SGIP program? As a homeowner, taking advantage of these rebates, lowering the cost of your system, and getting the storage that you need, the power resilience, whatever it may be that you're looking for, and really taking advantage of those rebates. As the installer, offering customers lower system costs, and really helping them to file the rebate and apply for the SGIP with your help. There's some pretty complicated stuff. For anyone that's filled it out, it definitely takes a lot of nuance as far as what you know. As a distributor of solar and renewable energy parts, the role really is to educate installers of the program and encourage applications in hopes that we can, we're making everyone aware that the Simplify product is eligible for the SGIP, and we are applying for those when we can on these installations. Okay, so some additional resources, and we'll be sure to send out all these slides so you can have these. PG&E's website with the SGIP program there, as well as the self-gen at pge.com for the email. SCE's website, again, more SGIP stuff, and SGIP group at sce.com. The SoCal Gas, their link for SGIP, and SDG&E as well. You can also find the 2020 SGIP handbook. You can look at the forms, documents, and FAQ page. Super helpful if you have any questions. It's probably already been asked. As well as view the incentive step tracker and developer cap metrics. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. Let's see if we can hop here. I just want to see, Brian, have you joined the call yet?
So it looks like Brian's still jumping out of that last meeting, but I have the presentation here. So Troy, I'll jump into it and share my screen with Brian.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And everyone, we're going to do the Q&A after Brian's slide. So we will get to that though, but go ahead and type any questions you have now about those slides, and we'll let Dan take over from here.
All right, thank you, Troy. So I'm going to share my screen. And Troy, if you can just stop sharing your screen, I'll be able to share mine here.
Yep. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, there you go.
Thank you. All right. And Troy, you can see my presentation, right?
It actually looks like you are in not full screen here. If you go to slideshow and start presentation.
Yeah, it's just showing on my other monitor. Bear with me one sec here.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you all for your patience. Wouldn't be Monday without a little technical difficulties. All right. So with Brian's part of the presentation, again, he's joined just a bit late here. It's okay. He's been with PG&E for almost a decade now, and he's been an SGIP program lead and currently leading the resiliency team through PG&E. And so it'll be a great resource, especially come to the Q&A section. And so really want to cover just a real brief history here of where SGIP started and where we're at today. And so the CPUC started as the program for all utilities initiating in 2001. And that's where the PV incentive started, really, as the first home, until the CSI here in 2006. Now, the greenhouse gas standards with the California Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, again, is where this really got its catalyst. And going through some policy updates, depending on your tenure in the solar coaster we've all lived in, you're probably familiar with a handful of these. But originally, it started as a real big fuel cell advocate, and then going into storage, wind, and broadening from there with SB 412 and moving into 861 approved SGIP to collect through 2019, and of course administrating through this year that we're in. And when we really started dedicating a lot more funds as a state was when we doubled it. Funding through 2019 and adopted the maximum collections per year statewide. So that was really big news that we saw. Furthering the program itself, we went through a really big modification of the program, the rules, the structure, back in 2016. And that's to getting to the program we've seen. So we've seen these reiterations really adapting to the times, and then most recently to the PSPS shutoffs that we see, and the advocacy for really helping with resiliency. And obviously a lot of PSPS shutoffs happening up north in PG&E territory is where we'll see a lot of those maps that we noticed in the earlier slides cross over each other, right? And then the SB 700, our latest issuance, really changed some of the budgets, the resiliency programs, and other design of the nature of the program. So big main goals here for SGIP, and that's really the basics, the grid support, peak load reduction, improving the efficiency and the reliability of the transmission and distribution system, and lowering the infrastructure cost. I mean, those are the guidelines across the country, and California typically leading the way and being that laboratory of experiments policy-wise. We've definitely seen some great things come from SGIP, and then a lot of learning come from it as well. So environmental being a secondary goal here, reducing the greenhouse gases. That was oddly enough a unintended consequence where certain previous years storage products were storing electricity from the grid during times that it was being created through or generating through fossil fuels. And so oddly enough, greenhouse gases actually tended to increase at one point due to the SGIP incentives. And so we really had to rework and redesign the way that we incentivize these dollars, and really made ratepayer funds work for everyone to achieve the environmental goals of the program. And so the market transformation from there to support technologies that have been the potential to thrive in the future years without rebates. That's the end all be all goal that we all want to get to, right? And it all starts with some initial funding, and that's where we're at with SGIP today. So the SGIP program updates and some upcoming changes, Brian wanted to make sure we're pretty clear. The financial assistance advice letter, a PG&E proposal to offer upfront incentives on bill financing for the resiliency focused projects. Currently, it's still being decided upon by CPUC, but of course, whether you're part of any industry policy groups or you can just follow along our website, Simplify, we're always trying to stay as up to speed as these changes occur throughout the year. And of course, AB 700, the PA is just public administrator filing to begin implementation.
Hey, this is Brian Bishop. Can you hear me?
Hey, Brian, we got you. I was going through some of your slides here, but I'll rescind my control over to you if you want to dive back into it.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, sorry I'm late. I was trying to get on Zoom and there were some obstacles. Apologies. Maybe if you don't mind going back to the start, the first couple slides, I'll just give you the quick intro. I wanted to,
Yeah.
Is that okay? Or are we on time
Absolutely.
constraint?
You just tell me when to go, and I'll.
This is a good slide right here. This is a good one right here to start with. First of all, my name is Brian Bishop. I've been at PG&E for 7 or 8 years. I've run SGIP for about 5 or 6 of those years, and I come from kind of the solar industry and renewable energy. Did a green MBA, that kind of stuff. So I've been around in this sector for a little while, and I really enjoy this work, and it's very important to me. And I'm privileged to be able to roll out SGIP on behalf of PG&E. We have recently grown our team, and we have a full group of folks working with CBOs and local government on that side, schools, food banks on that side. And we also work extensively with the residential market. And we're trying to do a lot of things for SGIP. And we're especially motivated these days. We formed a customer resiliency team with a bunch of talented people pushing SGIP as part of broader solutions to support people during fire season, with regard to public safety power shutoffs. So I'm part of that team now running the SGIP, and it's an exciting time. There's a lot of work to do. But I wanted to give you a quick program history because the SGIP has been around for a long time, about 20 years almost now. It's a statewide program. It's administered by PG&E, Southern California Edison, SoCalGas, and Center for Sustainable Energy on behalf of SDG&E. It was the first program that provided the first incentives for photovoltaics until the California Solar Initiative started in 2006. And the program has experienced a lot of change since then. There's been a lot of changes in Sacramento that have impacted the program, adding technologies, fuel cells, storage, wind, other technologies. The program has mostly been, over its history, a generation program. So if you were to go to our metrics page and pull reports on all the installed projects over the years, most of the projects, most of the kilowatt hours have been from things like fuel cells and large internal combustion engines, wind, and before that, of course, PV. Now, the program, or since I should say about 2016, when the program really started pivoting towards energy storage, advanced energy storage, or electrochemical energy storage, or batteries, those are all kind of interchangeable. We've doubled the funding for batteries, and we've really shifted the program towards energy storage and that concept of resiliency, especially recently. And then also equity. So in the decision, third from the bottom, 171004 created the equity budget for providing incentives to low-income disadvantaged community customers. So an enlarged incentive for those kinds of projects. We also have GHG rules. We've always had, or I shouldn't say always, but for a very long time, 2006, we've had GHG expectations, but no specific metrics. We finally put specific metrics into the program as it pertains to energy storage performance. And lots been changing. So, this last decision, 2001-021, which came out earlier this year, adopts revisions pursuant to SB 700. So budgets, resiliency, other program changes have just happened. And it's really been kind of a whirlwind year and a half or 2 years, last 2 years with equity coming into the program, GHG rules, and then also this idea of resiliency. So skip to the next slide if you can. The 3 program goals, which everyone needs to keep in mind when they're thinking about SGIP. I just want to keep everybody honest on this. I try to remind myself of this too. The program was founded on the basic idea of providing grid support and peak load reduction. That was the first goal in the program before the other 2 even existed. So The idea is to provide incentives to projects, technologies that could improve the efficiency and reliability of the T&D system. So that was the first goal, behind the meter projects that could support the grid. Then came environmental, and I don't know why it's numbered 1, 1, and 2. It should be 1, 2, and 3. But anyway, environmental came into the program, reduced greenhouse gases and criteria air pollutants. Those are very, very important goals. And then market transformation, which is kind of what the program was always doing in terms of supporting technologies that could be incubated towards success. So those are the 3 goals that the program is trying to accomplish in California. And I think, ultimately a 4th might be added here, resiliency, promote resiliency, something like that. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. And forgive me, I'll talk kind of quickly as we go through this, because I don't know how much time you have left. I think until 11, but I'll try to get through this. In any case,
yeah, you're good.
SGIP, what's that?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And also let me know, sometimes my phone goes out when I'm at home. I don't know why, but every time it starts sounding like a robot. But I did want to point out that SGIP is nothing if not busy. It's constantly changing. There's all sorts of things that happen with the program. The program administrators or PAs are always working on something, and the commission's always working on something. So right now, these are just 4 of the things that are going on. There's a financial assistance advice letter that PG&E wrote and proposed. And it's out there. The commission's sitting on it. They like it. It may be decided on soon, but what we have proposed is upfront incentives, or some proportion of a project could be paid right at the beginning of the project to developers, so that they're a little bit liquid. They have a little bit more funds up front to either work on those projects specifically or the next project. So that was a proposal we came up with. The rules kind of mimic on-bill financing and upfront incentive structure that PG&E has had in place for several years, but those were, focused on energy efficiency projects. We have that infrastructure in-house, and we have a balancing account to use for SGIP, so we decided why not offer on-bill financing and upfront incentives to developers, especially in these times with kind of the impact on the economy from COVID. So the commission's evaluating our proposal, and stakeholders kind of weighed in on it. They have when a utility files something, there's a comment period. There was a lot of support. There's some questions, so the commission's still thinking that through. Same with our marketing, education, and outreach (ME&O) advice letter that PG&E filed. We filed that with the CPUC to promote the program, especially with regard to resiliency projects for medical baseline. That's MBL, is medical baseline. Low income, disadvantaged community, resiliency, tribal. We're trying to roll this out as far and as fast and as effectively as possible. We have this plan. We're going to be rolling parts of it out now, but it is still technically getting its approvals at the CPUC too. So we're waiting on that, but that's very much in play. And the first 2 topics on this slide really work together. So we're trying to basically do both and situation. The program administrators, the PAs, are also filing required filing by the 15th on SB 700 changes. Lots and lots of changes came out of this decision 2001-021. If you were to go to Google, just type in CPUC space SGIP, you'd get directed to the CPUC's SGIP site. Very easy to search decisions there. They list them. You could find that decision 2001-021. It's quite long, but it's got a lot of good information in it. And that's what this filing is about. PAs, the program administrators, have to file lots of things. We came out of this decision. We have to file a lot of different things. And one of them is this advice letter that we're filing in days, and it's going to implement a lot of the changes that they've requested. Last thing on this slide is there's program openings coming up. So we are going to be opening the residential and non-residential equity and the residential and non-residential equity resiliency budgets on May 1st. The difference between, it's very important to get this, equity and equity resiliency projects. Equity is just basically not in fire zones. equity resiliency projects are in high fire threat districts, or you'll see the term HFTDs. They're in high fire threat districts, or they've been impacted by PSPS events before, public safety power shutoffs before. So, and equity resiliency, again, is really focused on that medical baseline customer, low-income, disadvantaged communities in those high fire threat districts. So we're trying to provide the most support to the most in need in those areas. And the incentive for those equity resiliency budgets is $1 a watt hour. And that's high. If you could advance to the next slide, please. You probably are aware that that exceeds, in most cases, the price of the system. Could we go to the next slide? Thank you. Thank you. So, you know, the dollar a watt hour, it's kind of in the right box, down a little bit. But this slide speaks to the changes that I've been getting at here quickly. Before, up until 2019, before that big decision 2001-021 that I mentioned, you know, the program was flush with money, lots of money, 310 million authorized for spending for SGIP. Most of it was for non-residential projects, though, and 50 cents a watt hour was the largest incentive rate, and the focus was GHG reduction. As I told you, the program has changed a lot over the years, and if nothing else, it's really kind of recently focused on resiliency, over to the right box. Now there's, you know, over 530 million in ESGIP budget from unused funds, and from new collections, more than half is to vulnerable customers impacted by PSPS, and $1 a watt hour is available for equity resiliency projects, and 85 cents a watt hour for just equity projects. That is low income, disadvantaged communities, critical infrastructure in those communities that serve those communities. So those are pretty big numbers. $1 a watt hour will pay for the battery. We have data on, you know, battery costs, and I think, you know, a lot of those numbers are out there. You know your own numbers, you know. That's a healthy incentive. There's marketing challenges and you know, kind of informational, educational challenges, but we hope that's something that that is attractive. And next slide, please. This gets to what I was talking about. These are numbers that we put together. They may or may not be exactly accurate, but this is equity and equity resiliency non-residential storage incentives that are going to be available starting May 1st. It's important to note that the equity resiliency budget is for non-residential and residential, and the incentive is the same in that bucket. It's $1 a watt hour for a residential project or a non-residential project. So just keep that in mind. If you're working with schools, it's equity only. It's not the equity resiliency. So it'd be that 85 cents a watt hour. I call that out just because the decision came from the commission. I think it was a little bit of a glitch, but schools only are qualified for the equity budget. But I don't want to obfuscate here. We can talk about that offline if you have questions about schools. But the point here is that the total costs for projects are below the incentive rate. That's the big picture. You know, the blue bars on the left, you know, total cost for small, medium, commercial and industrial projects, around 80 cents a watt hour. Large projects around 65 cents a watt hour. Residential are around in between that, sometimes a little bit more than 80 cents, depending on the developer. And then you have this waterfall of the incentives in the yellow bars: $1, 85 cents, and 40 cents. GM under 40 cents incentive, that's general market. So that's every project outside of a resiliency zone or equity, non-equity budget project. So again, the incentive is very healthy. The program is flush with money. The problem in SGIP is not having enough money to pay for projects. The problem is rolling it out and getting people's attention, and really positioning as these are incentives for batteries that you know, hopefully accomplish at least two things. First of all, support vulnerable customers. Also supporting customers in fire zones, in high fire threat districts for PSPS purposes, so people can ride out an outage for a number of hours, maybe days, if paired with solar. but also like there's a very important program goal I haven't talked about yet, but it is greenhouse gas reduction and secondly, bill savings. Those two goals are kind of swept under the rug with the focus on vulnerable communities and PSPS, but greenhouse gases are a rule in the program. So batteries must perform. They can't just only be used for backup. I really want to emphasize, bold print, underline, they can't only be used for backup. Batteries must be used regularly. And the kind of way to think about it is at least fully discharged once per week. Because there are expectations and standards, there are greenhouse gas rules that are going to start up when we reopen the program May 1st. So batteries do have to be used regularly to reduce GHGs. So there's plenty of language about that in decisions and about the program, and I can help you with that. But also, batteries can be used, assuming the customer goes on the right rate, the time of use rate, to reduce their bills, right? So that's a kind of fundamental day-to-day operational thing that people should be aware of, that batteries can be used to support customers, on a daily basis, where if they have solar, they charge up the battery during the day, they're on a TOU rate. So it's got a 4 to 9 PM peak, and they can, discharge the battery in the evening and save a little bit of money. So that is another selling point of batteries, incented through SGIP. So with that, I think I'll end it there. I think we covered a lot. There's some information here on this last slide. You guys have the slide, so you can reach out to me. My name's Brian Bishop. I'm down at the bottom. I have there's a lead that will help with non-res projects as part of the program. His name's Andrew, and between the two of us, we can help you on just about anything you want. These websites are good sources of information. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and jump into this Q&A? We got a few questions on. If anyone wants to get a question in now, go ahead and feel free to type into the Q&A. All right. First question. If we have a customer installer or end user who is interested in SGIP, would the team from Simplify be willing to work with them to ensure they qualify and also support them with the process ongoing through to getting the funding? We greatly appreciate your customer support. Absolutely. I mean, I know I can speak from my side of the business, the support side, post-sales as we call it. We're happy to help fill out the application, provide resources, provide answers direct for what to put into certain fields. And Dan, maybe you want to hop into as far as what we're willing to do with pre-sales as well for supporting customers and installers.
Yeah, definitely on the back end, we can help fill in the specs as Troy indicated. In terms of the pre-qualification of SGIP, it's going to be very subjective. And so, of course, as a manufacturer, if it's related to our products, we can see if they're eligible. But in terms of going through, say, their bills or reviewing their addresses or their power safety, power shutoff history, those are things that would likely fall on the responsibility of your sales team. But we're here as a resource. So always feel to reach out with a question to your account manager or myself with any specific questions related to it. And at the end of the day, we're here to help. So just let us know.
Awesome. Okay. Brian, it looks like you're going to have a few questions coming up here directly for you. I've seen conflicting details on equity resiliency criteria. Can you confirm, Brian, if someone must be in a low income area in order to qualify for the equity resiliency, or if that is one of the options to be eligible?
They have to be in a low income area. Yeah, that is true.
Got it. Perfect. Easy enough. Also another question, same person, in regards to eligible rates for PG&E projects. The only two rates that are available to select within the SGIP portal are electric vehicle rates. I think that's meant to say and time of use rates, or are time of use rates eligible specifically for those customers who do not have electrical vehicles?
Great question, because that is something that we noticed, a month or two ago, and we filed an advice letter with the commission to expand rate opportunities at PG&E. So whereas the other utilities had a rate that could be repurposed for equity resiliency. PG didn't, and it was just a glitch, and we thought we did, and the EV rates applied. So we filed an advice letter, and for the life of me, I'm blanking on the name of the rate, but that is in progress. The commission knows we need to get this approved as soon as possible, so customers have an available rate. The good news there is that will be approved by the time you go sell a project, sign the contract, build the project, which is going to take a long time, and then have that customer change over to that rate. The customer would just have to change over to that available rate by the end of the process. And so we're working on that. But I apologize that it's a little confusing with PG right now, and we're fixing it.
Awesome answer. Okay. Will there be measures in place to allow small contractors to have fair access to the benefits of the program as opposed to large, well-funded contractors jumping in and gobbling up all the reservations for themselves?
Good question. The program has had developer caps in place in the past in a variety of different ways. The developer cap was 20% for each developer. One developer could only grasp 20% of each budget before. For equity resiliency, there's no cap. But there's also hundreds of millions of dollars. So, I understand the concept of the cap. We didn't see a lot of data suggesting that it was needed to promote the small developer because some of them were emerging anyway. There weren't a lot of cap implications. But honestly, my feeling is that if those hundreds of millions of dollars were used by any and all participants and rolled out effectively to the potential customers out there, that would be a good problem to have. But I don't think that we're going to run into any pinch anytime soon, especially for equity resiliency, because there's so much money in that account. There's just, like I said, hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's also statewide. So I understand the concern. Small developers are welcomed, and we want more and more of them. Absolutely, and yet I don't think there will be anything. There's no barriers to entry right now, as far as I can see. From the developer cap perspective.
Awesome. Okay, a few questions for Simplify here. What enclosures would you have to house 2 to 3 phi batteries? We actually do offer a few enclosures. We've got basically the access enclosure that we've offered for our all-in-one products. You can actually buy that without the inverter and everything in it, just for batteries. We also have a smaller enclosure that's related to our express unit. It's actually on wheels, and that one can house, I believe, 2 batteries, maybe 3, I think, without the inverter inside of it. And those are for 3.8, which is eligible for the program. Will we be sending out the link for this? I'm not sure exactly on timeline, but I will touch base with marketing, make sure that you get a presentation on the webinar, as well as that the recording will go live on our webpage and probably our YouTube channel once it's edited down. Okay, this question is actually from one of our team members. $1 per watt hour incentive per usable kilowatt hour or total kilowatt hour capacity? I assume total kilowatt hour capacity or total kilowatt hour. If usable, how does PG&E verify the depth of discharge?
For the incentive, we're not looking at depth of discharge. We've already looked at simplified batteries, by the way. So unless there are new products I'm not aware of, and there may be, I think that they've all been approved by the SGIP program. SGIP does review all batteries, equipment specs. But I mean, it's the way just to use a basic example, if it's a 2 kilowatt if it's a 2 kilowatt 4 kilowatt hour battery, I mean your incentive is based on the kilowatt hours, based on the specs of the system. So it's 4 kilowatt hours. You multiply that by the incentive rate, because the incentive rate is per kilowatt hour, dollar per kilowatt hour. So that we use system specs like that. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, and that makes sense to me. And I think to answer the question even further, as far as depth of discharge goes, and specifically with the simplified battery, we're okay with 100% depth of discharge. And I think that really is, the growing trend for most lithium batteries. And if not the trend, as you mentioned, specifications being, that's what we're looking at. So if the battery is only usable at, let's say 3.6 kilowatt hours, but rated at, full 4, I'm assuming we would go with the lower, what's actually usable. So I believe that makes sense to me.
Great.
All right. Are residential storage projects below 10 kilowatt hours in size subject to performance-based incentives?
No.
Easy
They
enough.
get all they get all their incentive upfront. We call that upfront incentive, and so by that I mean residential projects get built, they get the full payment at the incentive claim stage. Sorry for the terminology there, but there's different milestones in the application process. At the end of the process, when the AHJ has signed off on the project, we've reviewed all the documents that the developer has uploaded to the portal, and we've approved. And if it was inspected, not all residential projects are inspected, by the way, but assuming all the paperwork's fine, the developer submits the incentive claim form claiming the incentive, and assuming it all checks out, we cut the check at that point. And for residential projects, it's the full amount. For performance-based incentives, PBI, that's for larger projects, right? And like a commercial project, say it's 100 kilowatts, bigger system, they get half of the incentive once the incentive claim form is submitted, so 50% of their incentive, and then they have to perform to get the rest of it. So over 5 years, they get a check each year for 5 years. That's how the system is, the program runs. So that's a PBI payment once per year for 5 years to get the rest of the incentive, and you have to submit to the program performance data showing how many hours you ran, and you basically get your incentive time the hours, and it's a bit more nuanced math there to get it, but assuming that your system runs as planned, then you get all your money that way.
Awesome. All right, a couple more, and we'll try to get through maybe 2 more here, and just be respectful of everyone's time. But if I don't get to your questions, I'll be sure to mark them down, and we'll get some emails out. Can you clarify regarding the soft launch and the May 1st SGIP application date for equity and equity resilience?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I understand the full scope of what you mean by clarify, but the SGIP PAs decided there are a few more aspects to the energy solutions database, which is what users will be using. There's a few aspects to energy solutions database we wanted to further refine and test prior to opening, and we have been juggling a lot. And so we talked to Energy Division about that, and they, on our behalf, requested that we be allowed to postpone the opening of the non-residential equity resiliency budget and the non-res equity. I think I mentioned that on a few slides up. You can see. So basically what we said was, let us, in a nutshell, what we said was, let us further refine the database so that it doesn't have glitches or any errors, or that it's and we also wanted to upload all the approved system spec sheets, so that it, through drop-down menus, it's very easy for users to go in, select their equipment, rather than have to type it in. So some improvements along the way too that we're going to expedite and improve the user experience for all, and also remove these problems that we're finding with some applications that were being submitted, and they didn't have the right. I don't want to get too into the details here, but they didn't have the right characteristics, such that it forced the administrators on my end to do a lot of work. So we're improving everything to speed up the user experience and the PA experience in reviewing applications, so we can get through everything much more effectively and efficiently. So, and the commission approved that. So we're going to open, basically think of it as everything is open on May 1st. If you're working on a general market project or whatnot, that's still open. But that's a much lower incentive. I imagine most people are focused on equity and equity resiliency projects. So just think May 1st for everything. That gives you some time. and you're happy to, go into the website now and check it out and start learning about it. And if you have any questions, interact with us in the program. We can help you.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and just read off this last one, but I'm going to tie it. These two questions are a bit related. So I'm going to read the first one and we'll get through the next one. This question is, I have seen installers in our area who are discounting the PV Plus free battery where the SGIP rebate is paid to the installer. Can the rebate be paid directly to the installer? And then the second question, kind of piggybacking off that, does the incentive go to the owner or developer of residential projects? If to owner, can it be assigned to developer? Does the have received prior incentive qualifier for equity incentive include the federal tax credit? Sorry, a bit of a mouthful there. I can reread any of that if you need it.
Well, two things that I heard out of that were federal ITC and who's the payee. So contractors are going to handle it in different ways. When I was in the solar industry, we'd handled it one way, different companies handled it a different way. The payee is going to be in the application who will receive the incentive check. That's up to you. We're flexible on who's the payee. It doesn't have to be the customer. It doesn't have to be the company. I mean, some companies, I think, build in the incentive to the overall price, and then the payee becomes the developer or the integrator, whoever's selling the system. And they factor in that they're going to capture the incentive when it gets paid out. Some customers like to get that check, and so they structure it that way. Maybe it's a higher price for the customer, but then they're going to get the incentive check. So it's up to you. We're agnostic on how you want to do that. The ITC, though, does have to be acknowledged in the application, and it does impact the incentive rate. So it lowers the incentive rate, and those rates are on our website. So it reduces it by a little bit, but it does have to be acknowledged, the ITC.
Awesome. All right, everyone. I do appreciate everyone's time. Brian, I really appreciate your time hopping on, helping out, giving some great answers for all these questions. Just a little bit of ending housekeeping here. We will be sending out the presentation slides, as well as the recording will go live on our webpage eventually. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to, obviously it looks like Brian left his information here, as well as some good links. You can always reach out to us at Simplify, where we're happy to help. And as I mentioned earlier, if you did register before the 8th, you're going to get a little goodie bag here for this presentation. So you'll be reached out by one of our team members to get some address information. Brian, again, thank you so much. Dan, also appreciate you hopping on. Really great presentation, and thanks everyone for attending.
My pleasure. Nice to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.